Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. Really interesting size, 5'11", 227. Incredible power, fantastic vision, but really limited receiving work. What is it about Estime that you like to see, Jack?
So I watched him over the summer and I liked his tape. But his tape in 2023 I thought was he took his game to another level. He's obviously got the size, which is always a big plus. But I think he's been somewhat mischaracterized as a kind of downhill bruiser, north-south type guy. I think he's far more than just a north-south power runner. He's light on his feet for a guy of that size. Now, he's not an elite athlete. I don't think anybody would say he is. His burst is middling. His long speed is, by NFL standards, pretty average. But he's got that ability to kind of slalom his way through. He's got good vision at the line. He can see holes. He can then hit them. I think he's elusive in short spaces. I wouldn't say he's a guy who's going to be making people miss in space, but he's got that just unique ability to go into a crowded box and then somehow he comes out the other side. And I don't know how he does it, but like the NC State tape, if you're going to watch a game, watch the NC State game because it was fantastic. There were some great runs in there. He did also have a massive, I think it was like an 80-yard touchdown in that game. He forced 0.3 missed tackles per attempt, which, we're talking like that's, upper echelons of running back prospect numbers. But I think he was also like 90th percentile for breakaway carries, which I think kind of proves that point about how he's not just a short yardage guy. Like you don't have that many runs of 15 plus yards by accident.
Yeah, I like him. I think I like him more as an NFL prospect than perhaps purely for fantasy. I think that he does have fantastic vision, which I don't quite know why we have this kind of mental approach, but I tend to think of power backs as having poor vision normally because it's just a case of they get up to speed and try to run people over. But actually he does press holes. He does, make that little jump cut into the right gap. And I think he is fantastic at reading those cutback lanes. What I really like about him in space is he's not an athlete. He's not agile, but he makes very subtle movements to get defenders off balance. So he's able to run through arm tackles rather than having to run over somebody. And I think it's a really subtle skill in that it helps kind of create to that, as you said, those breakaway runs, that high missed tackle force rate, without having to have elite agility where he's not having to stop, cut and go. It's just subtle changes of direction which keeps almost defenders slightly guessing. And I think it's really impressive, and that leads to that high amount of missed tackles. The receiving for fantasy really concerns me. I think he can be used in the receiving game, but it doesn't look natural. I don't think he's a player that you're going to get out running, choice routes and things like that. He is a check down and a screen game. He's not the same player, but it looks a little bit like Derrick Henry, where the entire world can see it's been schemed up and you're not quite sure if he's going to catch it, but sometimes he sort of pulls it in and then he gets going and it's great. But I don't know how well that translates to the NFL in terms of that, which could potentially limit him to that sort of 2-down workload rather than a pure 3-down workload.
Yeah, there was a game and I can't remember which one it was, but they asked him to run to Texas route, like a kind of out and in, and it was like he was an articulated lorry trying to turn on that gap. So I mean, like I like him, but as a receiver, he's never going to be a mismatch, right? You can line up with a linebacker on him in man coverage and be absolutely comfortable that they're going to do the job. His game reminds me a lot of David Montgomery.
I can see it,
and I think both in NFL terms and in fantasy terms, you can kind of see where the upside is with that and the limitations are with that.
Yeah.
He's
I
only
think
20 years old though, which I think is like I hadn't realized how young he is. Like those limitations we're mentioning are not necessarily going to get better with age, right? He's not suddenly going to become Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, but he's young and he's still got room to grow, which I think is encouraging when you see what his profile is already.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that we've probably not even touched on is his pass probability. I'm one that sits here and says no running back in college can pass protect. Like it just seems like it's not really a skill that's taught very well. There's very, very few backs that come out of college able and willing to do it. He is one of those that can hold up, and yeah, whilst we're saying he's not going to be a receiving back, he's not really a guy that you're going to get running routes. The fact that he's competent in pass pro is going to keep him on the field. And, if he can be a 2-down thumper that gets kept in on those obvious passing downs because he's that 6-man in protection, that's going to help him stay on the field. And he's going to get, some block and release options. He's going to get some of those, check downs when the back are green dogs and he suddenly becomes free. And that has value. And I think there's, the challenge with this running back class is that there's no stars. There's no guy that you can come out and say, yep, you're a definite 3-down workhorse back at the next level. But that doesn't mean that they're all bad. It just means that there's quite a few backs in this class that have got kind of one knock or one bit that they don't quite do. And he's that. And I think that if he was a 1A in a committee, I think he could be really useful.
Yeah, I actually really like this class. I know it's got so much hate because of some of the guys who went back to school, but I was kind of drawing up my rankings today, and no matter how you cut it, there is a great guy. Well, maybe not great, but a very good runner that you're putting at like RB7, RB8.
Yeah.
Like it's an interesting class, but I think Estime's like you say, he may be more of an NFL back than a fantasy back, but he's an interesting prospect, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think there's 7 or 8 guys that would be a good RB3 or RB4 in a normal class. And the problem is that this class doesn't have that RB1, RB2 that we can all get excited about. But the depth of good, reliable options is really impressive. And I think there's a lot of talk of this is a bad class, but I think we just need to flip it and say doesn't have a superstar, but it's still a good class as such.